Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Yankee and Canuck podcast, a show where we discuss TV, film, and more.
And I'm your host, a Yankee.
And I'm your host, Canuck.
And today we're going to be talking about Broadway Melody, the 1929 second Best Picture winner. And yeah, what a big piece of shit this movie was.
Did you really want to go in just like that?
Yes. What did you think of it, though?
Yeah, I mean it wasn't good, man. I've seen worse, but yeah, it wasn't good.
Yeah, I can't say
Shot.
it's the worst movie I've ever seen, but god damn, man. As far as Best Picture winners are concerned, what the hell were they thinking with this one? When you really look at, what it was nominated for, it was only nominated for like 3 awards. Best Actress and Best Director. Those are the other 2 awards, so yeah.
Yeah.
And it only won one. And of course, the one it won is Best Picture. What the hell, man? This film was a scam. It was a tax write-off of some kind. I mean, but when you look into the whole affair, Louis B.
Yeah.
Mayer, the co-founder of MGM, he started the Oscars, so it kind of makes sense that his own film won Best Picture also that year, right?
Mm,
And to give it a little credit, it did make money at the box office, because people were razzled and dazzled by the fact that their
sure.
people are talking and all that stuff. And it also had 2 Technicolor sequences. Unfortunately, both are lost to time. Well, I say unfortunately because it's just like, what difference does it make if you see it in color or not? But I guess
Yeah.
when it comes to film history, yeah, it's like it's unfortunate that those sequences are lost. But on YouTube,
Right.
people made an attempt to recolorize it just to give people an idea of what it may have looked like.
I mean, you can see some elements of this movie, kind of a blueprint for some future musicals for some period of time. I know for a fact it changed in the 30s and 40s, but so I think while it wasn't good, there's some credit for being a pioneering film at the time. That being said, yeah, I was pretty disappointed. I haven't seen the other films that were nominated. I think one of them was called The Patriot. Maybe that's the one that's about the Russian emperor.
Yeah,
Um,
the Russian
the one who's
Tsar or something like that.
yeah,
I haven't read the
but
synopsis or anything, but from what I can gather, based on what other people were saying about it, it's just like the other films had more interesting premises. This is the cinematic equivalent of dangling keys in front of an audience's face. It's kind of like if Michael Bay were to release Transformers and it won the Best Picture because it had incredible special effects.
that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah,
By the way, we're
yeah.
talking so much about this film, we barely touched upon what exactly it is. It is a musical film, and the story goes as follows.
Yeah, you got Queenie Mahoney, who's played by Anita Page, and Harriet Hank Mahoney, who's played by Bessie Love. Hank is kind of the more level-headed sister. And she seems to have more experience in the field, more business sense, and she's definitely more of a mother figure to Queenie.
Yeah, because they're both very young. They're barely like teenagers going into their early 20s. They make a trek all the way to New York City just so they can get their big break on the Broadway scene. You know what I mean?
Right. The opening sequence of the film is an aerial footage of New York City.
It's interesting to see it in the perspective of 1929,
Yeah,
USA.
I liked it. It's cool. Yeah.
I could appreciate this film as a little time capsule because one of the things about this film, it is a very early talkie film and it's at the very end of the 20s. This is actually about 8 months before the stock market crash and it kickstarted the Great Depression. So this was actually towards the end of the Roaring 20s. Opulence, extravagance,
Yeah.
it's just like all that was going to come to a crashing halt. So this was one of the only glimpses that you could see with sound of what that period may have been like. Again, it's a Hollywood
Yeah.
movie. A lot of it was probably theatrics, a lot of it was played up, so how accurate it is, who knows. But it is an interesting look at early 20th century American life. The other characters are, save for one, are completely and utterly repulsive human beings. We have Eddie Kearns, played by Charles King. Now, this guy was the fiance for Hank, but then as soon as
Yep.
he sees Queenie, he's just like, "Oh, I remember you when you were a little girl. Oh, now you're a big grown woman. Ooh." I'm just like, "Oh my god, this guy just gives off major grooming vibes." Like
Yeah,
right off
for
the
sure.
bat. So yeah, so all of a sudden he just over the course of the film, he just goes from wanting to marry Hank
Thank
to wanting to bang Queenie, her sister, and it's just like, okay. And then later on in the film, we're introduced to a Jacques Warrener, who's, it's basically a play on the name Jack Warner, who was the head of Warner Brothers at the time, who's a
you.
creepy, feely, molesty kind of man who is going after Queenie as well. And he's just like, "Ooh, I can give you anything. Can I have a kiss? Can I have a feel? Can I do more?" And it's just like, ugh. And the
Yeah.
only of the main cast, the only one who's not a creep is Uncle Jed, played by Jed Prouty. I hope I pronounce his last name correct. And he's basically their agent, their vaudevillian agent.
They haven't seen each other in quite some time in the beginning. He actually even offers them a gig. I can't remember how long it was, a few months, I think. Some sort of program and traveling show or whatever. Hank actually turns it down. That's where then the journey for them begins to New York City.
Yeah, so they're only like what, really 4 or 5 main characters. There are more characters, but let's just be honest, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Who
So I would
cares about
really say three main characters and then a couple supporting characters.
exactly, yeah. And then the other characters are, they serve some function in the film somehow, but let's just be completely honest. The story is completely and utterly paper thin. It's nothing to do with the main point of the film, which is either a money laundering scheme of some kind, or it's just really to show off, the extravagance of the stage. From what I was gathering when it came to this film, as soon as talkies were exploding and becoming more of a thing, because the year before then, they weren't really so much of a thing. The year prior, that's when, it was still dominated by silent pictures. The year that this film came out, that's when it became more talkies. And then as, the years would go by, not very many years after that, silent films would eventually be completely phased out. And of course, why
Absolutely.
would
Yeah,
they
yeah.
stick around? Why would people want to watch silent films anymore when you have talkies? So when this film came out, the idea behind it was just like, well, instead of paying $4 to go to the Broadway show, you could pay 75 cents and go to your local theater and you can get the same experience. And you can kind of see why that would be so attractive, you know what I mean? It's the
Yeah.
modern day equivalent to that is like, why go to the theater when you can just stream whatever you want at home?
Yeah.
It's about convenience at that point. People didn't have to travel probably long distances to go to some big extravagant show. Not everyone lived in New York City, So it's just like this was just the
Yeah.
beginning of a brand new era.
Yeah, I would just save up your money and go to the real Broadway and then watch this film, man. Let's be honest, this doesn't remotely have anything in common with Broadway. This is an insult to theater and the great hard work that goes into actual theater and Broadway and whatnot. So
Okay, so it's a musical, and so therefore you would think that the music would be half decent. No,
yeah,
it's not. It's largely forgettable. I'm just going to preface by saying I'm going to really talk a lot of trash about this film. However, I'm going to say it's the music is just not awful. It's just generic. It's just like there's nothing about it that stands out. It's not earwormy. It's just like even the title sake of the film is the title of Eddie's song that he wrote for the Broadway, and that's
yep,
played, I believe, 4 times, sung 3 times.
yep,
I'm just like,
yep.
like stop it.
And you hear it right away in the beginning of the film and then throughout it.
It opens up with a cacophony of noise, like all kinds of
Oh yeah,
people like just doing all kinds of things at once, and I felt like they were overcompensating for the fact that you can hear sound.
that was one thing right off the bat I was concerned about. The opening scene, which is right after that aerial shot of New York I was telling you about, the scene basically is a music production studio. And let me paint a picture here. That shot, the opening shot in the production studio, you see the main room with Eddie and the piano, and then 2 rooms, one with a quintet and the other with a piano and a singer. Basically, the shots end up going to each room, which different performances are going on, all part of the bigger production. But in that main room scene, you can hear the sounds from all the rooms at once. It is excruciating. It's really awful to hear. It's like hearing 5 songs being played at once.
Yeah.
And I was like, if this is how this movie's starting, we got a real problem. Like, I don't know how much of this I'm going to be able to tolerate.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, it
100%.
was a straight up assault on my ear, and I wasn't digging it. Like, please
I know. And,
stop.
and this is like barely the first, 2 minutes of the film. And you're like, oh,
Yep.
God, here we go. And the rest of the movie goes as follows. Because again, at the end of the day, the story doesn't matter. The girls come in, they meet Eddie, they get in their apartment, and then they transition into a job in the Broadway play. They play the music, they go through the play and stuff. And that's when a bunch of melodrama comes into play, and it's just like, and this is where it gets really confusing. I'm going to be completely honest. I had to see the movie twice because the first time it was just barely keeping my attention. I was just kind of playing on my phone once in a while. I'm going to be fully transparent about that. So in preparation for this podcast, I had to watch the whole thing again and just be, focused on the entire thing from beginning to end. And my God, I regretted every second of it because just honestly, whatever I missed was really nothing worth mentioning for the most part, because the drama is essentially just, you got Hank who's involved with Eddie, and then Hank wants to bang Queenie, and then later you have Jock who wants to bang Queenie, and then Queenie is just like, oh my God, I want to be a star. We're going to go on the BVDs. And I have to look that up. I'm like, what the hell is a BVD? And apparently it's an underwear company that owned a bunch of billboards in New York City. So that's what they call it. That was a little slang term they had. I want to be on the BVDs. Okay, cool. And then eventually they get into an argument because it's Queenie's birthday all of a sudden somehow. And she's like, I'm going to party with Jack Warner because he gives me diamonds and a Rolls Royce. I'm like, ugh. And so Hank is like,
and an apartment.
And an apartment, exactly, yes. Yeah, I'm just like, and then Hank is like, I bought that bitch a cake and she's not even here. I'm like, and then you transition, and in between all of this pointless melodrama, they're musical numbers, and they play the same goddamn song over and over.
You've got a clown on Broadway, don't bring a frown to old Broadway. Your troubles there are out of style. A Broadway, always wears a smile.
And by the end of the film, Queenie decides to stay, and she decides to go with Eddie because even though Eddie is just a complete, utter piece of garbage of a human being, she's like, well, he's got some good qualities after all. And then Hank's like, you know what? F this noise. I'm going back to the West Coast, and I'm going to get a new sister, a new act. And Uncle Jed, who basically sounds like Porky Pig the entire time he's there, he's like, come on, Mahonies, we gotta go, we gotta have that moose, and it's just like, and then they get in a car and they go back to the West Coast somewhere. Yeah, that's the film. That's the film. That's the whole film.
Yeah, I mean, it really is pretty much it. Even though it's a musical, they try a few things. Obviously, they interject a little bit of humor. Even that is pretty rough.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it was 1929, but I mean, the humor constantly was falling flat when they had it. I mean, for example, there's one scene where Hank is like, calling me Maloney instead of Mahoney. Can you imagine it? Maloney. Ha 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 ha. And they all start hysterically laughing for like 10 seconds. And I'm like, yeah, man, I can imagine it. What the hell? Y'all are weird, man.
Yeah, at one point they say baloney.
Maloney.
And I'm like, I'm sorry, how old are all you? 2 years old? Like, what kind of humor is this? Even for great grandparents, standards.
Oh man, I was like, it was pretty bad, man.
It was really bad. And you mentioned humor, though. I mean, even by 1929 standards, I mean, prior to that, we had Charlie Chaplin, we had Harold Lloyd, we had the Marx Brothers, Laurel and Hardy,
yeah, I mean,
Buster Keaton. There's so many great comedic geniuses during that time, and they didn't have sound to work off of most of the time.
Yeah, fortunately, they didn't inject too much comedy. But when they did, it was more irritating than anything.
Yeah. It's clear that the script was a complete afterthought. They were like, all right, write some stuff in there, and we'll do something with it, I guess.
Although I will say, one scene that was not meant to be funny, I'm not entirely sure. It was entertaining, but I'm sure you recall. In the story, there's the main actor who's in that Centurion Roman outfit. He's center stage or downstage, and he's complaining constantly about the spotlight. I think he complains a few times.
Yeah.
And there is a part later in the film where the technician, he just tosses the spotlight down from the catwalk onto the stage, narrowly hitting him. And he's like, oh, shit. Honestly, he could have killed him if it landed on him.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I would have liked to see that land on him, but...
That would have been hilarious.
Would have been more entertaining, but...
It's just an indication, like, what this film really needed was more slapstick humor. It just needed to not be taken so seriously. And... Yeah, and prior to that scene as well, like, because he's complaining about the spotlight in his profile. It's like, you're ruining my profile, and the spotlight tech is just like, your profile was ruined the minute you were born. That's like the only time I laughed because I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I were to fix this film, I would interject more humor. I would make the actual drama make more sense. I would make Eddie way less of a creep. Jack Warner being a creep is fine. He's the antagonist. I mean, there's nothing
Yeah.
particularly wrong with that. You're not supposed to like the guy. But when Eddie's also being a creep, it's just the morality of the whole thing comes into question. And it's not. And those are the two main examples. There's also another thing where Queenie goes into the costume change so she can get into this little outfit where she sings, and that's where Jock Warner first notices her. This is like about 30, 40
Oh yeah.
minutes into the movie. The guy
Right,
who's trying to
right.
get her into the costume is just like, you better take that dress off. He's like, I've never done that before. Oh, you better do it.
I don't know.
And I'm like, what the hell is this dude?
Everybody's all grabby. Like the amount of like pulling and grabbing people and like it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's oh,
Shoving them around and stuff. I'm like, what are you doing, man?
yeah, and I don't even think it's necessarily we're seeing this from modern 21st century eyes. I mean, it makes me question like how acceptable this stuff was even back then. I talked a lot of trash about, the dancing and the singing. When it comes to the actual dance numbers, listen, at the end of the day, they're just blasé. They're just generic. Obviously, a
Yeah.
lot of time and effort was put into actually synchronizing all the dancers together. When it comes to a movie like this where talkies were completely brand new, they had to do so many takes in order to make sure the sound was properly synchronized. So we are talking about long days, long hours of the actors just doing the same thing over and over. So I'm sure this was a trek to go through. So on that standpoint, I would appreciate the film a little more, that the actors and everyone else in the background were just troopers having to put up with this. Because I can't imagine dancing for that long, especially that one sequence dealing with a certain tap dancer.
Oh man, don't even get me started. That tap dance scene. I mean, look, it takes serious skill. It was entertaining, but come on, we don't need a close up of a foot for 5 minutes. And I mean close up of the foot, and for minutes it seems. And what's up with that foot? 4 minutes. Like, what did the director have a damn foot fetish? I mean, I bet Quentin Tarantino loved this scene. I mean, it was probably
I
his favorite
bet.
scene in the whole damn film. But
Probably directed by Tarantino's great grandfather.
probably, man. But
Well, he's older than
yeah.
us. It was probably directed by his grandfather. But yeah, I'm just like, yeah, that was unusual. I mean, at the end of the day, we're stacked up to other musicals that have come out since then. Like a classic example, Singing in the Rain. That is a better film. Gene Kelly's just a better dancer. He's got better choreography. It's just
Yeah.
like it's just like it works out way better. And I forgot to mention like the resolution of the film. Not that it really matters, but like when it comes to like Hank, she was supposed to marry Eddie, but by the end of the movie, Eddie's just like, I want to go with Queenie, and then Hank, because I didn't realize this, but seeing it the second time, Hank was basically going like, oh, I knew you loved Queenie more. You're like, you did? Yes, and that's fine with me. I never liked you anyway. And I'm like, what?
Say you've been kidding me all the time?
Sure, I've been kidding you. Say I wouldn't marry you if you was the last man on earth.
She might have been saying that as a means to cope with the events that occurred, or an extension of a defense mechanism of sorts. I mean, I don't really know. Who knows?
I don't know. It just felt like that they realized that the
Yeah.
story was going nowhere and it needed a resolution of some kind, so they just hastily wrote something on set. And they're like, all right, so it doesn't make any sense that the love interest changed, so why don't we do this scene here where you just said that you don't even like him anyway? What? Really? Yeah, just do that and we'll film it, and then we'll do a scene of you crying against the pictures or something, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah.
Because we got like 10 more hours of dancing after this, so let's get it out of the way.
I would say her performance probably was the best in the film. Overall, I didn't think the acting was very good.
Yeah, it wasn't.
The performances weren't very good. Hers was probably the best, although a few times I was like, okay.
I mean,
But
silent people acted better than they did.
true. I mean, going back to the fact that this won the Academy Award and the previous first winner the year before was Wings. I mean, to go from that movie to this movie, I mean, wow.
Yeah,
Come on, man.
that's a jarring change right there. And this is ranked among the one of the worst, if not the worst, Best Picture winners of all time.
There you go.
And it's easy.
That's not surprising.
Yeah.
That's not surprising.
It's easy to see why. 100%. Especially since the next film that comes after this one is considered to be a really good one. Maybe not one of the best, but a really good one. So you basically have two great films, and wedged in between them is this bastard redhead child that no one likes.
Yeah.
You know, that's Louis B. Mayer's little tax write-off.
So, Yankee, how would you rate the Broadway Melody?
I give it a 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10 because, it's pretty awful in the story department. The performances, nothing special. The music numbers, the dance numbers, nothing special. But it's a movie. They put some effort into it. And when you couple that with the fact it's the first sound picture, or one of the first sound pictures, it's the first sound musical, and, probably all those long hours of them doing the same thing over and over and over again until it was just right, I give it a little bit of props for that. So ultimately, that's my rating.
And my rating for the Broadway Melody would probably be about a 5.0. I'll give it credit, of course, for being a pioneering film, first musical film. So they did accomplish quite a bit. However, the plot is very simple and basic. Acting isn't that great. The music itself wasn't that great either. Definitely, a series of flaws in the film. There are issues, and yeah, I think 5.0 pretty fair. I suppose one more thing I can add, a fun fact of sorts, was while I was unfamiliar with the actors in this film, and I didn't think I'd seen any of their films, I did notice under her filmography, Bessie Love, who plays Hank, actually was uncredited in a role in James Bond film on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which was George Lazenby's only portrayal of Bond.
A really good film,
Which,
too, by the way.
yeah, I actually thought that was a pretty solid film. I know he was kind of a polarizing, Bond, but the film itself was pretty solid. But anyways, that's a topic for another time.
Well, when we
Yeah.
see that movie, if we ever do a retrospect of the James Bond films, we're going to have to find her.
Yep. I think that'll be a series we'll be doing as well.
Yeah, because ultimately this is fun. Even if the movie's terrible, it's fun to talk about how terrible they are.
Yeah.
All right, well, I got nothing more to say. How about you?
No, I don't really want to say anything more about this film. And I guess the only other thing, I mean, honestly, I mean, I could see this film being a form of torture for some. I mean, you put this shit on repeat for some criminals or something. I bet there are some back in the day that would scurry off to the gallows and have to watch this film over again.
Like a
But
Malcolm
I don't
McDowell Clockwork Orange kind of scene. It'd be like, oh, you sure?
know.
Are you reformed yet? Watch more
Yeah.
Broadway Melody. No, please, no more! Play it again. And here's the Broadway Melody.
Melody.
Ah, just kill me already!
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Yankee and Canuck podcast.
And we're going to be talking about the next third Best Picture winner. So stay tuned for that. So it was lovely to talk to you all, and we'll see you again.
Peace.